Hello and welcome to the MovieKing Podcast. My name is David Jurmann and I'll be your host. To start off today's show, I'll be doing a two-part discussion on something that has always been around in the movie world but feels especially prevalent this year, and that's re-releases. So once I discuss the whys and some interesting aspects of it, I'll be doing a bit of a ranking of one of my favorite film studios, Laika. So to start off, let's kind of discuss why are there so many re-releases. As I said, it feels like there's way more in 2024 than usual, and I believe the reason for that is one thing: strikes. So because of the writer's strike and the actor's strike from 2023, there were lots of delays from studios. As a result, studios kind of pushed movies from 2024 into 2025, left a lot of empty spaces of big blockbusters especially. Small movies still kind of made their dates, but big stuff got delayed, like Snow White. That kind of put the studios and the theaters in a bit of an interesting position where they needed more revenue. So as a result, you kind of have them both decide, hey, let's just put some movies out that we've put out before. Maybe people will give them another shot. Kind of like what happened with COVID. Theaters came back from COVID. What's the first thing they do? There's not a lot of new releases. They just release all the fan favorites. Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Spider-Man, anything from Marvel like Endgame. All that great stuff that made a ton of money before. Hopefully it'll make a lot of money again. And no matter where you look, no matter what chain theater you see, they have some sort of re-release going on right now, probably even. Even right now, you see Blue Beetle's out again. A lot of the Batman movies are out again. You got some horror stuff. As I said, comic book movies have been out. You have some fan favorites. Even awards contenders like Whiplash is out again. Sometimes even in large screen formats, and that's another thing to talk about. Twisters came out this summer in 4DX. It blew up in the format. You had all the chairs moving and water getting sprayed at you and all that crazy stuff. It's a great format. And Twisters was such a great opportunity for the format that they decided, hey, let's re-release the original Twister. And a lot of people flocked out for that. You have Coraline in 3D. You have The Nightmare Before Christmas also coming back in 3D. You have some other things like The Batman and Shaun of the Dead, Les Miserables in Dolby Cinema, which is known for, very big screen, bright images, a lot of contrast, and sort of an HDR look, which is sort of a high dynamic range. And then you have surround sound going all around, 7.1 Dolby surround sound. Great thing, by the way. Highly recommend that. And then you have some stuff like Tenet and Interstellar. Christopher Nolan's big movies, they were shot on IMAX 70mm. You can only see that in a few locations in the nation. Those are very big. And you have the A24, Studio A24. They release stuff like Hereditary and The Lighthouse and Talk to Me. They have a whole series in IMAX. Every so often, they'll kind of release one of their movies, like Everything Everywhere All at Once. Coming up soon is The Witch and The Lighthouse. Stop Making Sense is another one that's coming back. So lots of IMAX stuff coming out too. That's a big thing. And additionally, you have your typical re-releases, such as the Studio Ghibli stuff, the anime studio. And even some other things like the unrated cut of Saw and the director's cut of Midsommar. So it's really just a lot of variety in that whole area. Cuts you never maybe have seen before. Formats you may have not seen a movie in before. Just a lot of different variety for people who want to see a movie they love in a way that they can now see it on a bigger than average screen. And what this provides to the moviegoers is it provides maybe a version of the movie you haven't seen before, or a format you haven't seen the movie in before, like IMAX or Dolby or 4DX or 3D even. And people love seeing what they already love, or experiencing it in a new way, or maybe re-experiencing it completely the same way they did before. So you just get a lot of people who just want to see these movies again, maybe show it to their kids, maybe introduce it to another family member, maybe just see it for the first time themselves. It's just a lot of great experiences you can get that way. And it's surprisingly busy. These premium large format re-releases especially are huge. It's been a trend since COVID, I think, and this is kind of another little subject, but people ever since COVID seem to be, flocking over to the premium large format theaters like IMAX or Dolby. And the reason for that, I think, is because people now are so used to watching things on TV that I think some people just don't think the regular movie theater is enough anymore. They're like, if I'm going to spend, $15 to go see this movie on the big screen, why don't I pay an extra $5 and see it on a bigger screen with better sound and, great image quality, better than I could get even in a regular movie theater. So that's been a big thing, and I think, even the re-releases especially, kind of highlight, I've already seen this movie at home. I don't really even need to just see this in theaters. I want to see this on the big screen. I want to see it on the biggest screen. Now, let's transition this to another point. Re-releases are a safe choice. They don't cost much money to release because you don't have to market it that much. They barely have to convince audiences to see it because a lot of the audiences already know about it and they'll just talk about it to other people if they have seen it. And sometimes these movies even do better than new blockbusters that come out, which is what I'll talk about now. So for the sake of this argument, I'll be discussing Coraline. It's probably the biggest re-release of the year. It was playing for basically a full month, which for a re-release is super impressive. I mean, most of them just get a couple nights max. And it's constantly packed showings, and it's a movie from 15 years ago. So it's a movie that, like, shouldn't on paper be that successful, but hear me out here. We're going to get into this. So this is in August 2024, and we're going to talk about two movies from August that should have been pretty big. They were pretty big releases for the month, and that is Borderlands and The Crow. If we look at Borderlands, we can see that it costs a little over $100 million, which is a lot of money. It is a pretty big movie. It has some big people in it, like Cate Blanchett, Kevin Hart, Jack Black, and it made only around $33 million worldwide. Now, again, that's worldwide, not domestically, not just in the US. This is talking about every place it's been. And to be clear, this may not, I can't officially say this is the final amount this movie made, but it is the final amount as of this podcast recording, and it's been out for, a month already, so I think it's pretty safe to say this is about as much as it's going to make. It's already on digital. But in any case, let's talk about The Crow. It's a remake of a movie that came out a while ago. Pretty big release, has Bill Skarsgård in it. He's been in a lot of good stuff lately. And it cost around $50 million to make. It only made around $23 million worldwide, which is awful, by the way. Again, full transparency, this may not be the final amount the movie makes. Maybe it'll make a couple million more. That's probably it. Now, Coraline. This is, again, a movie that came out 15 years ago. Probably didn't have to market it much. Studio probably spent barely anything marketing it. And you also have to take into account Borderlands and The Crow, their budgets. This isn't even accounting for marketing. It's probably another, $25-50 million for marketing at least. So lots of money going into those two. Coraline probably didn't have to be marketed much. And with that, it made $32 million domestically. $32 million. That's a lot of money for a movie that's 15 years old. I mean, you have to take that seriously. That's crazy. And looking at that, I mean, it made $50 million worldwide. So it's ridiculous. I mean, $32 million domestically, that's more than The Crow made worldwide. It's almost more than Borderlands made worldwide also. And $50 million, it's almost as much as both of them combined. So really crazy here how much Coraline made. It's really just crazy to think about this movie making that much money. And against two pretty sizable releases, Borderlands and The Crow, both pretty big releases. Both are by Lionsgate, by the way, so they're really taking a big loss from this. But Coraline, just insane to me how much it made. And again, sold out showings constantly. I went to go see this movie on a Tuesday night, and it was so busy that the one 3D showing they had that night, they had to add another one. And that one also got very crowded. So Coraline was doing crazy numbers. Lots of people, families, want to take their kids to it. Now, I know what you're thinking. This may be unfair to compare Coraline, this huge success re-release, to compare it against two box office flops. But I think the real takeaway here should be that movies cost a lot of money, and they aren't always guaranteed to make their money back. So, Crow cost $50 million, made $23 million worldwide. Borderlands cost $100 million, made around $33 million worldwide. They lost a lot of money. That's a big loss. And Coraline barely cost anything. So, Coraline didn't cost much money, and it made a ton of money back, so why wouldn't you keep doing that? This is the formula. If we just keep re-releasing movies that people love, they're going to make a ton of money. So, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think that's kind of what Hollywood's taking away from this, maybe. And I think people don't always want to take risks with their wallets. With The Crow and Borderlands, they don't maybe want to spend money on a movie that they may not like, because these were also critically panned movies. Borderlands and The Crow got terrible reviews. So people probably don't want to risk, not liking a movie that much and paying that much money for it. They want to see Coraline because they love the movie or they've heard people love the movie and they want to experience this on the big screen in 3D. And this is a very big trend this year. I think it'll likely continue far into the future because, again, if the studio doesn't have to, risk that much into making this movie come out again, if it's a movie that people love and will probably go see regardless, then why not do it? It's a safe way to earn money, and it's a great way to get people back in the theater. So why not? I don't know. It's an interesting thing. So that's kind of where I'm at with the re-releases. I think it's a very viable strategy to get people back in theaters. And honestly, I love seeing these movies back in theaters. I loved Coraline on the big screen was probably one of the most exciting experiences of the year. I thought it was really worth going to, so I'm totally down to see more of these movies be released in the future. So, speaking of Coraline, that kind of leads us into the next section of this show, and that is ranking Laika's movies. Laika is the studio behind Coraline and a lot of other great films. They're a stop-motion studio, if you didn't already know this, and I'm going to kind of talk about all their movies because I just think they deserve a shout-out, honestly. They're one of the best studios making things today. Up there with Pixar, absolutely, and Studio Ghibli for animation, just taking it to another level, making mature content that it's not just for kids, it's for families, and oftentimes even more for adults than the kids. So, really want to talk about this studio and their movies. So we'll kind of be going down from 5 to 1. They only have 5 movies because stop motion is so time consuming to make, and they only have a few movies. But let's get started here. The weakest movie they have is The Box Trolls. It's not a bad movie, it's just not a good one either. There's a lot of elements I like to it. It kind of takes place in London. It follows this boy who's taken in by these box trolls, which sounds silly on paper, but they're these cute little trolls who have boxes as their clothing, and they raise the boy. The boy thinks he's a box troll, and he meets this girl, this human girl, and they kind of have a thing going, and it's a cute movie. It's just very safe. It feels like, and you'll kind of maybe get this as I'm talking more about it, but it doesn't feel like a Laika movie. It just feels kind of like your standard animated studio movie for kids, maybe a little bit for adults in there, but not that much. I just don't think it's a great movie. It's just kind of lacking the maturity of a lot of the others, but it is gross. I will say, there's one thing in this movie. I rewatched all these within the last month, and the Box Trolls has some crazy stuff with the villain that is absolutely going to gross kids out. So I don't even know who this movie's really made for. It feels like it had kids more in mind than the other ones on this list, but at the same time, it's also pretty gross for kids. I don't know if kids should really watch this movie. It probably gets a C+. It's fine, pretty inoffensive, but I would not watch it again probably, for a long time. But next up is Missing Link. And this one is also pretty kiddie. You'll notice kind of as we get more into this list, they get much more mature, but Missing Link is more for kids. Good cast, Zach Galifianakis and Hugh Jackman. It's a Sasquatch and explorer going on an adventure to find the Sasquatch's home. And it's cute. It's pretty funny. It's not like anything hilarious, but it's cute. Again, I enjoy the characters in it. I think it's just entertaining, watching these characters interact. I love the cast again, and it's really nothing that memorable, but just for what it is, it's entertaining. It gets the job done. I've only seen this movie twice, but I've enjoyed it both times I watched it. I would absolutely watch it again, especially over the Box Trolls. Overall, it's probably a B. It's pretty good, but nothing too great. But that leads us up next with Paranorman. And Paranorman, man, wow. I really like Paranorman a lot. I didn't really appreciate it this much as a kid watching it, but seeing it now, you realize how much this movie has under the surface. It's actually quite dark and sad. Probably one of the most sad, family movies I've ever seen. And that's going against, The Lion King, Land Before Time. Some really upsetting material. But Paranorman kind of starts off as this movie about a witch kind of having a curse and zombies coming out and attacking the city. And it's played for laughs largely. It's not a very serious movie in that aspect, but once you get into the last third, and by the way, the last third of Paranorman is one of the best third acts I've seen in any movie ever. It's still one of my favorites to this day. It's an emotional powerhouse that just kicks you right in the gut. But Paranorman turns into this movie about loss and people who don't understand and people who judge. I can't really get too far into why, but it's just, Paranorman is so good. If you haven't seen Paranorman, go watch it. It's really a terrific film. Again, really in that last third. The first two thirds, nothing that special. Like, it's probably up there with Missing Link, but the last third just totally knocks it out of the park every time and reminds me why I love Paranorman. So that gets a B+. Very good movie. Highly recommend it. And up next, number 2 is Coraline. What can I say about Coraline that hasn't already been said? It's scary, it's fun, it's exciting. The movie's pretty scary. Like, I actually was I've seen this movie a few times on TV, never in theaters. When I saw it in theaters, I actually got pretty, freaked out a little bit. It's very dark, but it has humor to it. The characters are really good. The performances are great. I love the world building here. It's just such a cool movie. It just has such a distinct vibe and look to it. I don't know, there's something about Coraline that's so interesting to me. And I love what this movie does. It's one of those movies that, you watch and it's just an instant classic. So, Coraline is a great movie. Gets better, honestly, every time I watch it. And for that reason, it gets an A- and is number 2 on this list. But at number 1 is a movie that I think is even better than Coraline. And it is one of the best animated movies I've ever seen. And that is Kubo and the Two Strings. My God, I can't emphasize enough how much I love this movie. Because it just has so much heart. It has so much emotion to it. Raw emotion, great storytelling, great characters, and exceptional animation. Excellent stop-motion animation. It's just a movie that challenges everything you know about family movies because it is so dark, but also so funny and charming and just sentimental. I just love everything this movie does. It's a movie that may not sound like that amazing on paper, but just watching it in execution, you really just care about these characters and this world. I mean, I literally just watched it a month ago for the first time in years, and it just blew me away. Again, just every time, there's some movies out there, maybe you'll understand, that you just watch after seeing it again, and you're still blown away, just as much as you were the first time. And that is Kubo and the Two Strings. That's what the movie does for me. It's really hard to talk about these movies without really getting into too much detail, but I just think what Kubo and the Two Strings does on an emotional storytelling level is one of the best I've ever seen in these kind of movies. It is also probably just one of the most amazing films I've seen in a long time. It's a masterpiece. It is Laika's masterpiece, and it gets an A+. 5 out of 5 stars. Go check it out. It's amazing. So that about does it for this episode. Go check out all those Laika movies, please. If you haven't already, they're totally worth your time. But if you want to follow my reviews, you can find me on Letterboxd at MovieKing1224. You can also listen to this podcast on your favorite apps such as Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. If you have any comments or feedback, I would love to hear it and improve the show. And of course, if you've enjoyed this episode, please consider liking, subscribing, and hitting the notification bell to hear more like it. I appreciate you all so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.